Hello, dear ones. It is so good to be with you this week. Last week I talked about, on our first sabbatical, climbing to the top of Mount Sinai. And part of why I wanted to share that story was that I had framed it as a pilgrimage, that how we seek the spiritual is often by climbing up to see the light, and how much that framework had limited my imagination and my understanding about where we can get curious and where we can seek the sacred in our lives. I had imagined that where I might best experience a divine encounter was in this sacred site of Mount Sinai in the desert, where historically it had been a site of divine encounter. But of course it was not that for me. But so often that divine encounter is framed in light and height. What I wanted to talk to you about today was depression and seeking the sacred in the darkness. Because I know in this time in February that, and particularly pronounced during the pandemic, that there is more and more depression in our community. And I mean that in the largest sense of our community. People are getting tired. People are getting tired of the pandemic. People are getting tired of sheltering in place. They're being denied so much. On NPR this past week, I heard an interview with a woman whose specialty is on casual encounters, and the importance of these casual encounters, people that we would normally meet going out for coffee at a regular time, that we just get to know these regular cast of characters. We may not even know them by name, but we often know to say hello to them, people who serve us in grocery stores, people that we encounter just casually. And those casual encounters have decreased dramatically in the pandemic. And this researcher was arguing how important those casual encounters can be in knitting our social fabric, and how the lack of them is one of the ingredients, one of the elements that is leading to this increase in depression. When I think about depression, I think about two authors in particular. And it was interesting to me that Krista Tippett's program on Being this week actually was a re-airing of interviews with Andrew Solomon, the author of Noonday Demon, an atlas of depression, which is a remarkable self-revelatory book about his own journey through his depression. And then, of course, Parker Palmer and his work in Hidden Wholeness. I want to focus on Parker in particular because I actually have spent time with him and talked to him about depression. Parker talks so openly about his depression and what was helpful to him and what wasn't. And in the Hidden Wholeness, he shares the story of a Quaker elder coming and sitting with him, not being one of those people who said, "How can you possibly be depressed? You're so good, you're so wise," which only deepened his depression. But this Quaker elder would come and just sit with him and asked to rub his feet. And he said, there was a lack of life in me and in my body, and the only place I actually felt were the soles of my feet. How he knew that that was the point of entry where I could feel something, I don't know. But the elder would come and rub his feet every afternoon at 4 o'clock. They rarely spoke, but occasionally the elder would say, "I'm intuiting that you are really struggling today." And inevitably, his insights were spot on. The other story Parker shared with me when we were talking about depression is the other thing that was helpful to him in the next round of clinical depression that he lived through was his therapist encouraged him to think about that interplay between light and dark, and that he was capable of finding the sacred lessons within the darkness, and that it was that interplay between light and dark. And the therapist also said, what I want you to do is go up in your backyard and stand on one foot, which he did. And inevitably, he would fall. And he got more and more frustrated with this practice, but what he realized is that each time he fell, he would get up. And both of these embodied practices of having his foot massaged by his friend and the elder in his community, and the exercise of standing on one foot and falling down and getting up, these embodied practices helped him in that interplay between dark and light to slowly reclaim his life. In Christian theology, depression was seen as a disease of the soul, and it carried through the centuries since it was so defined by St. Augustine as a disease with great stigma. We don't know all the root causes of depression. We know that there's a biochemical dimension, that there's an environmental and spiritual dimension. But what we need to do is just recognize depression and its cousin anxiety are a natural part of many of our lives, and to accept it and be able to share with people that lack of vitality, which is depression. It's a kind of deadness, an internal deadness, where there is a lack of feeling, a lack of connection. And to say, this is what I'm experiencing, and just in naming it and in sharing that I'm suffering, that can be life-saving. So if you are feeling depressed or feeling that lack of vitality, that lack of connection, I hope that you know that your ministers at Unity Church are available to talk. If that doesn't feel like a comfortable option for you, I hope that you will reach out to someone and let them know that you're struggling. All of us are struggling at some level right now, and we are joined together in that struggle for health and wholeness.